if you would just share your screen, then we can start.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Lucy Bullivant. I'm one of the trustees of Temple Bar Trust. And since July 2020, I've curated the Trust's popular online series of talks. And you can see the wealth of talk videos and films that we've created from that point, as well as details of all our future events, talks, walks, and films on the Trust's website, templebartrust.org. Now, as many of you know, the Trust promotes architecture, urban and landscape design in the square mile to a wide public through a regular programme of talks and tours. And equally important to us is our very active support for greater diversity in the architecture and the built environment professions, which we address as part of our talk series, but also associated educational initiatives. It's going to be really fantastic to finally return to live events at our home, Temple Bar on Paternoster Square from just after next Easter. This really exquisite architectural gateway to the city, designed by Sir Christopher Wren and managed by the Trust, is also home to our associated worshipful company of chartered architects, of which I am a liveryman, or that should read livery person, in fact. We really look forward to reactivating its space for in-person events, for meetings, dining and entertainment from the late spring. So tonight, I am really delighted to welcome our speaker, Tara Gbolade, the architect and director of the award-winning Gbolade Design Studio. Gbolade Design Studio specializes in responding through architectural design and policy making to environmental, social, and economic sustainability priorities, building on insights from communities. That is really very important at the heart of their practice. So in Tara's talk tonight, Responsive Design, she's going to present some of Gbolade's Design Studio's architecture and policy projects that highlight just how the practice achieves the ultimate goal of designing kinder places to live, work and play. Tara is a RIBA Journal Rising Star winner and co-founder with Lonre Gbolade of Gbolade Design Studio, which they both set up in 2018. She studied architecture at Liverpool and Newcastle universities after moving to the UK following her childhood in Nigeria. And she is a certified passive house designer. Tara sits on the steering group of Architects Declare, and she recently said in a magazine interview that in this decade of action, humanity finds itself humanity finds itself in. The most useful architecture is one that responds to the deep inequalities held in societies worldwide, while protecting our planet for future generations. So her expertise in design and planning policy saw her lead the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town Sustainability Strategy, which is an ambitious planning guidance for Essex and Hertfordshire County Councils. She's a member of design review panels for Kensington and Chelsea, Lambeth and Merton, and she sits on the Public Practice Board as an alumni observer. She's a member of the advisory committee for the Impact on Urban Health Initiative, part of the Guy's and St Thomas's Foundation. And Gbolade Design Studio was this month selected for the new Southwark Council ADS 1.1 framework. And she is also a co-founder of the Paradigm Network, an innovative architecture collective. This very well-respected professional network champions Black and Asian representation in the built environment. And some of its members, such as David Ogunmiyiwa, founder of Architecture Doing Place, and Stephanie Edwards, founder of Urban Symbiotics, we have been delighted to host talks by them at Temple Bar Trust in the last year. So Please put your questions for Tara in the chat box, and we'll deal with them for you in a bit later after her talk, which we're really looking forward to. So thanks very much. Welcome, Tara. It's great to see you here, and it's now over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just trying to unmute myself, but hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you so much for the introduction, Lucy. And hopefully you can all see my screen as well. Yeah, that was a brilliant introduction. I kind of thought, when do I have time to work? But that was great. Thank you so much. It was awesome. I'm going to dive straight in. I'm going to maybe give a really high level overview of Gbolade Design Studio, and then dive straight into a couple of case studies of really different scales and proportions, just to give you an idea of the types of work we get involved in and what we're really passionate about. A general overview on this talk is that we know that we're in between crises of a climate and biodiversity emergency, and we know that key drivers for these include global warming, change in land and sea use, and our direct exploitation of organisms, as well as pollutions, specifically marine pollution. And we're hopefully really aware now, following the IPCC report, that we are more inextricably linked globally than we perhaps ever thought we were. But critically, that human activity is very much responsible for the state of our planet, which means that we must act now. We must all be advocates. We must all put climate justice right at the heart of our collective fight for a safer planet. If we're to thrive, we must hold our government to account as well. And it's important to recognize that this is not a drill, and there is seriously no planet B, as you will no doubt know from Extinction Rebellion. So a little bit, I'll run through these. So our team and our approach, and a couple of case studies. Oh, there we go. That's the Happy team. And we're based in London. And so we're a small team, but we hopefully have a big impact in terms of the types of project we work on, and certainly the ambition for the projects that we work on. As a practice, we really focus on ensuring that all the projects we work on fall within our high-level ethos, our practice ethos, which runs around being design-led. Of course, we ensure that high-quality housing, high-quality places, high-quality social infrastructure is critical to ensuring everyone has healthy and happy lives. We are community-centered, as Lucy highlighted earlier, which we know vastly improves our health and well-being and our sense of place, our sense of ownership in a place, our sense of putting roots down. We try to be innovative in everything we do, whether that's the process of how we work or indeed in solutions we find to architectural and placemaking challenges. And finally, sustainability is really the driver for how we look at space, how we look at the places between space, and how we look at buildings. For us, sustainability really adopts a holistic approach, looking at the environmental as well as the socio-economic aspects of sustainability, a lot of which I'll expand upon through the presentation today. So the first case study I'll start with is the work that I looked at while I was employed by the Harlem Gilson Garden Town as the sustainability officer. It gives, overall, as a practice, we work on very much sort of master plans and design guides, which are usually adopted as supplementary planning documents, and so therefore informing the sort of wider aspects of high quality living. So a couple of projects that we've recently been involved in, specifically myself and the Harlem Gilson Garden Town, as just said, working within the really ambitious and excellent Garden Town team. And the guidance which is now live is lucky to be a finalist at the Urban Design Group Awards, which we were all incredibly excited about. And this was definitely as my role within the Garden Town. On the right-hand side, we're working with Farrell's Architects for Southwark Council on one of the pilots for the National Model Design Code, and we're looking at the Hatcham and Ilverton area in Southwark. Today, I'll be expanding on the sustainability guidance. Just to give a little bit of context, the master plan you see in front of you is really designed for over the next 20+ years, which looks to bring forward about 20,000 new homes. It's located in and around Harlow, which is sort of centrally located on the screen, and it includes 5 partner authorities, including Hertfordshire and Essex County Councils. Expand on that. The master plan also runs across 4 key strategic sites, Gilson Villages to the north, which is East Herts District Council, Water Lane, Ladden Priory, and east of Harlow, which are all within Epping Forest and Harlow as highlighted in the center. Okay. One of the early exercises that we undertook here was to look at the carbon emissions from each of the district councils. The districts, these particular districts, like many others across the country, suffer from housing quality that can be improved, but also vehicular traffic. Again, this is something that's not uncommon to any of these 3 districts, and I'm sure you'll recognize it very much where you live. But what we noticed that looking at the scope 1 emissions, so the carbon emissions here, highlight the dark orange looks, and across the orange actually, it looks at emissions from buildings, the dark orange being residential buildings, but including commercial and industrial buildings. And then the dark blue, as you can see, is really from transport. So whether that be on-road transport, rail, waterborne navigation. So we can see the biggest contributors are very much the quality of our homes, but also how we move around between places. This allowed us to narrow our focus on what needed to be addressed. Looking very much at high quality housing, and the document really looks to set the agenda for high quality living and sustainable living and working. It also has been designed to promote exemplar development. So it's a piece of documentation that speaks to landowners, that speaks to developers, but that also speaks to the community, so they know what to ask for, what to drive for. It obviously speaks to planners and policymakers to ensure that this particular standard being reflected and being championed across the Garden Town. It acts as a guidance as well as a checklist, and now and I'll expand upon both of those points in a second. But then it also ensures that there's a clear and consistent approach to how we approach new development. This is a piece of work that is supposed to be used at master planning stage, but all the way through to post-planning. And it was important that we adopted this approach because we recognize that sometimes a lot of things are promised at early design and planning stage, and perhaps might not come through when construction is completed. So there's a big performance gap that we know exists in our industry, and so it was important to look at guidance that looked to start to sort of plug this gap. That's all faded out, but I'll talk through it. Through the guidance, it's important that it was accessible, simple to use, simple to understand, simple to apply. And in reflection of our slightly more digital age, it's quite an interactive PDF guide, actually. So it actually contains quite a lot more information that immediately meets the eye, because there are lots of pop-outs and links that are necessary to be used. The guidance also looks at incorporating both qualitative and quantitative measures. An example of that, which we'll expand upon in a moment, is where we're looking at very specific embodied carbon or operational energy that might be required of particular buildings, but also qualitative aspects in terms of ensuring there's more greening, sort of going beyond biodiversity net gain, perhaps. And to help us sort of get this consistent approach across the across the garden town, and certainly new buildings, specifically new homes that the document focuses on. We looked at low quality, medium quality, and high quality assets defined by the garden town. Low quality, really looking at where we are with current regulations and being policy compliant. But because because the Harlow and Gilson Garden Town, the partner authorities have declared a climate emergency, we know that there's a huge ambition there to become carbon neutral by 2030. So the low is in effect policy compliant, whereas the high looks at best practice and really looks at meeting that carbon neutral target by 2030. In order to do that, we looked at particular themes that needed to be focused on. Environmentally, we focused on building and building quality, so the performance targets and standards required. We looked at sustainable movements, so walking and cycling, how we are maximizing opportunities for that. Circular economy opportunities, ensuring that we're reducing waste when it comes to new construction and ensuring there's opportunities for recyclability or opportunities to design for disassembly. Sustainable movements, so that walking, cycling that I highlighted earlier, but the knock-on benefits of that, of more economic sustainability, where shops are able to be accessed by far more people just because they have that immediate connection to them. With socioeconomic sustainability, this was very specific, like environmental, but this was very specific to Harlow and the new communities being built around Harlow as well. Critically for us, it was about creating integrated communities, so speaking very much with the wider stakeholders of Harlow, but also the communities around Harlow. It's very much about ensuring that that the center, if you like, as and Harlow communities are not forgotten, particularly where you have the stitching in of existing places, existing communities to new communities, ensuring that any new social infrastructure benefits first and foremost the existing residents, benefit the existing communities as well. So we very much looked at speaking to such a broad range of stakeholders, from officers to councillors to local faith groups and charities, through to local businesses, but developers as well, big and small. So everyone, we felt that had a stake in the development of the garden town. In terms of coming back to this idea of being a really simple to use type of document, we first of all highlighted about making it interactive. So through the bottom, one is able to click across to said relevant theme as highlighted earlier, and each theme is broken across is put across a spread that has 4 key areas. One, looking at the objectives requirements, so also highlighting what it is the garden town is looking for. Then 2 is policy, and because we have 5 partner authorities as well as the garden town vision, it was important really to highlight what policies specifically, for example, in this particular case, energy efficiency and carbon reduction, what particular policy is relevant in these places. The third area is case studies, and we looked for local case studies and exemplar case studies, and also these include links directly to these case studies to ensure that we're showing how it is we want to develop schemes. And then finally, after identifying what we're looking for and how it can be done, then we have a measurable checklist that therefore encourages applicants to be able to look at exactly how their schemes are measuring up to what's required. I thought this is a bit technical, so I'll run through, but I thought I'd give a couple of examples of what they look like. Here, certainly with energy efficiency, we're very much looking at creating genuinely affordable homes. So fuel poverty is an aspect that we're looking at, ensuring net zero. We're transitioning to net zero carbon by 2030. So therefore, adopting a fabric first approach first and foremost, and really encouraging standards such as passive house standards, which would come under exemplar. Identifying also how we expect measurements to be brought forward, so whole life carbon analysis, but then using principles such as circular economy, but also ensuring that there's no that it's fossil fuel developments coming through. The top right highlight these case studies, which are interactive in this presentation, but they are generally. And then finally, just working with the guidance that was available at the time. So really looking at the LETI guidance, the RIBA 2030 Climate Challenge, and seeing how we can make that as much as possible local to the garden town, and wherever they align, being able to use that as well. We did a similar, that's just one of the examples for the environmental section, and we did a similar approach for the socioeconomic section. With this, specifically, we're looking to ensure that existing communities are cared for, are planned for, and are developed. So looking at developments to ensure that they have opportunities to cheap, accessible, healthy food. So for example, community allotments being part of developments, where we have public open space or parks, ensuring that gym gear and gym wear is available for local communities as well. Ensuring that stakeholder engagement forms a really strong part of any development coming forward. So local developers are required to ensure that the voice of the people that they are building for and around is very much heard and reflected, and very much building on the Harlow health and well-being strategy, and ensuring this whole life approach from early starts through to aging well in and around Harlow. And just highlighting some of the engagements that we undertook as part of the process. But the important one that I think the one that I wanted to highlight was barriers to adoption. And I think this is very much where we are as a society, recognizing that we are in a climate emergency. We need to make a lot of change right now. And so behavior change is a critical one. It's one that affects all of us. It requires all of us to make different daily decisions. And so exploring what those barriers to adoption are so that we can start to address them. We recognize that the industry as a whole needs to upskill. No one knows exactly I guess we all know where we're going or where we need to go, but no one has all the knowledge, no one has all the information. So recognizing that collaboration is such a key part of this process as we transition to a net zero carbon economy and society. Ensuring that there's opportunity for monitoring and performance assurance, and also looking at this consistency of definitions and case studies as more and more documentation continues to come out. We today had the LETI retrofit guidance announced and launched. We recently had I think it's the last couple of days, we recently had the government net zero documents and strategy come out. So recognizing that there are very many definitions, and it's important broadly to have a definition that we're all working closely towards. Changing scale, looking at the time quickly. Oh, hurry through this, but changing scale is looking at one of the architectural projects we in the practice are going through at the moment. And this looks at Hermitage Mews, which is a small site of 8 units, 8 new homes in Crystal Palace. And I thought I'd start very much with who we are as a practice in terms of how we're starting to make the transition. The top image is courtesy of Build Pass, and we're aware that the built environment is responsible for the number banded around is almost 40% of carbon emissions, including surface transport of the industry. These emissions come from our choices as architects, as built environment experts, and from the materials and construction methodologies that we choose to use and we choose to specify. We know that the alarm is well and truly rung, and it's important to recognize that we all have the power right now to make different decisions and regenerative decisions. When pen hits paper, it's important to recognize that we are deciding if we're pumping more carbon emissions into the atmosphere or not. As specialists in the industry, we make a myriad of daily decisions that either help regenerate or continue to degrade our planet. And as a consequence, we decide the quality of life for our communities, our neighbors, our families. We decide that the quality of life that they experience. And it's important to recognize that we are the ones responsible for that. On that very happy note, I'll talk through a project that we're working on, which is Hermitage Muse. And I think just a note on transition. We are, of course, custodians of our planet and must play our part in addressing this challenge. But I will also say that we are in a transition period. And so we should all count each win as a win, and hopefully we have a cumulative impact on where we need to go. This is a site, it's a really thin, narrow, quite heavily constrained site in Croydon in London. And as a practice highlighted earlier, we take very much a holistic approach to looking at each site. Towards the south of the site, highlighted red, towards the south of the site is Bewan Hill, which is quite a heavy vehicular route, and it meets the corner on Hermitage Road, and so the scheme is Hermitage Muse. It's important to note that the site actually had planning permission when undertaken by a different architect when our client brought it over to us. And the first thing we did, sitting with our clients, was to undertake a few sustainability workshops. The first thing we did was to decide on a performance target, and we agreed that the RIBA 2030 climate challenge was the most appropriate for this scheme. And I think it's so important to credit the client here for having the appetite and the ambition for going with this, and for trusting us as architects to certainly maybe challenge where they were at the time, and for taking it wholeheartedly. Those sustainability workshops led to us knowing, so a larger picture, those sustainability workshops led to us knowing that we're working collectively towards a shared and common goal. So not just the architects of pulling everybody kicking and screaming over the line, but the client was very much a leader in this. The wider consultant team were very much embedded in the process as well. And so ensuring that we were looking to meet the 2030 targets, which has been certainly version 2 of this guidance this challenge has come out, which really for domestic in this case looks at reducing the embodied carbon, or at least just more than doubling the embodied carbon requirements, just to highlight that there. But we were all very much embedded in the process, which made decision making far easier because we knew what our overall goal was. We undertook a few workshops and sketches that were highlighted in the previous page on the right, and we expanded upon this. Specifically, we looked at operational energy and embodied carbon and highlighted a few approaches. We knew at the beginning that we needed to have a fabric first approach. So we had much thicker walls that were perhaps allowed for a design stage, because we knew that we were trying to get low U values of 0.1 or less. 0.11 or less. We were looking to ensure that our windows and doors were again of high quality, so really good quality double glazed or triple glazed were designed, ensuring that our space heating demand was low at 15 kilowatts per annum per square meter. And looking wherever possible to make swaps as the building and as the overall ambition of our performance targets allowed. So specifically, we were looking at incorporating heat pumps. Initially, we were looking at ground source heat pump, but with the constraints of the sites, that turned to air source heat pumps. Masonry cladding, because again, at planning stage, we had brick. We very much looked at first to see if we can incorporate recycled brick. There were no existing buildings on site. So it would have been about getting recycled brick from a different location, which became incredibly expensive. So really looking at how, therefore, we can ensure that the bricks that we use are recycled in the future. So looking at different types of mortar, like lime mortar. For embodied carbon, we started looking at, and I'll expand on some of these points, we started looking at structure. So we redesigned the scheme, and certainly redesigned the scheme in order to look at how we can make the building touch the ground lighter. So it's a little bit more light-footed, which meant that the foundations, we could have far less foundations than we originally planned for. We also looked at the structure itself, and in order to do that, rather than having mainly masonry structure, looking at incorporating timber as much as possible. So whether that was with our party walls or our beams and columns, so looking at glue lamp structures in its stead, looking at where we source our windows and doors from, whether the UK or if they were going to be further afield across the continents, and ensuring that it was going to be countries with renewable energy as the main energy generation there. We also looked at the grid arrangement of our floor plans to again ensure that we were reducing as much foundation use as possible. And I'll move on to the next slide, which, yeah, there we go, which hopefully starts to look at some of the numbers that we started to generate using the Field & Craig Bradley Studio Carbon tool, which is a really good tool to start the process. We sort of started to demonstrate to the clients how and why and where shifts were needed in design to make better decisions. We started with overall trying to hit our target of just under 300 kg of CO2 emissions with the brick and block. And we knew that looking at this line that we were going to be meeting today's standards. We knew that we were way over, because there we were meeting over 1,000. And so starting to play with materiality, starting to play with structure, and looking at incorporating timber, retaining our brick facade, but incorporating timber. And that started to bring our numbers down. That started to bring the impact of what we're trying to do down. This was really good as a first start to communicate to our clients. And we went through a few more iterations to bring that right down. And we're really happy to say that by the end of it, we achieved, I think, 450 or 465, which meets the RIBA Climate Challenge version 2, which is 625 is the limit for that. So I wanted to expand on how we looked to achieve some of this. One is we specified different concrete. So we specified concrete for the foundations that would include a high recyclability content. So therefore, using ground granulated blast furnace slag, which is waste and a byproduct from the blast furnace used to make iron. We also looked to use aircrete, which is a lighter product than just traditional block work, which both gave us the thermal value that we were looking for overall when referring really to operational energy, as well as being a lighter piece for the structure. For a superstructure, as highlighted, we used timber wherever possible. The initial ambition was to have timber as well on the external walls as well as party walls. But due to, I guess, mortgageability of these homes, I think it's always important to reflect where we are in society and why it's important that policy catches up and government catches up to where we as designers, and what we know is possible is there needs to be some alignment there. But this meant that we limited this to party walls, so still bringing it in as much as possible, but perhaps a more limited spread than we were originally anticipating or hoping for. However, it's still a great movement, and we do count every win as a win, every small win as a win. And finally, with our external walls, we moved away from PIR and looked to have wood fiber insulation specifically, which we know outperforms synthetic products. Safe thickness, which is always the main challenge, but this was something that was critical for us to do, and so the client took that on as well. It has better thermal performance, and as we know that wood acts as a carbon sink, so therefore much lower embodied carbon targets from that. And for us, the wood fiber was really important because it achieves as designed performance as well. And these are just some of the images of where we are at the moment in terms of CGIs, and we are currently on site with completion, aiming for, these are earlier pictures, but completion aiming for, I think we can say May next year, which is exciting. And then finally, very quickly, I'll just run through another project we're working on, which is the Lloyd Community Center. I won't talk much about the design, but really about the people who have inspired where we are going, our direction of travel as designers. And one is the Domino's Club, who are the warmest people you'll ever meet when you visit. Same with the Bricks and Soup Kitchen. They're just truly extraordinary humans. But they play dominoes like every evening to train, and then the weekend they have their match games throughout the year, and they are just genuinely some of the yeah, like I say, loveliest people you'll come across. They are award-winning, and they play in London, but also go across the country playing in championship games. The building is also occupied by the amazing the Bricks and Soup Kitchen, who have a huge following on social media, so follow them. But they're great. It's always, again, every time you turn up, they're really warm. They always say welcome home, and they do good food, and that's always an easy win. We're working in collaboration with a wider team with Urban Symbiotics, who Lucy highlighted earlier, actually, so Stephanie and her team there, but also Green Tea Architects, as well as a wider consultants team. And these just show some of the volunteer days that we had with them, and how the occupiers use the current building, which is a grade 2 listed building, which is in really poor state, and needs to be upgraded and retrofitted significantly. And that's where we come in, and that's in effect our brief. But the top image just shows the forecourts of the existing building, which over the COVID period was used to serve people of the community who needed their service. And towards the rear is the rear garden of the community center, where dominoes games are played. I think what was incredibly inspiring about the group is that both occupiers serve a regenerative function in the community, in their local community. Each person that comes in is not just fed and watered physically, but also very much their soul is fed and watered. They're there to meet people, to connect, to meet friends who may have not seen in a little while, to have a sense of community. And everyone who leaves, having observed, everyone who leaves a little lighter, leaves a little happier. And I think that idea of regeneration is something that really struck us. And we started to think about our architecture and think about how do we move beyond sustainability and into regenerative design, which in effect looks at how do we move from doing less bad. So rather than a reduction in carbon emissions, for example, how do we look to have a positive net gain? This is just another image of that, but really focusing on positive environmental impacts, positive socioeconomic impacts on the community. This allowed us to start to think of whatever solution we come up for a response to the brief, ensuring that it's perhaps designed for disassembly and reconfiguration. This means that in the future, the occupiers are able to use the building in any way that they feel fits at a particular time. So whatever is designed now may last for 20 years, but those bits can be pulled apart and relocated and reorientated to serve different needs further down the line. Again, from the outset, we started to use the FCBS carbon tool just to highlight where we might be going with the scheme. So here we're looking keenly at, certainly for the extension, we're looking at CLT, timber construction, looking at potentially particular materials like cork and recycled timber. Which leads to a few materials that focus on recyclability, that focus on regenerative design. And here we'd love to just maybe expand on two key ones. One is moss. The reason for this is that our building is located on a junction on a corner, and there's a lot of high vehicular traffic in both directions, a lot of stop starts on this corner, which means there's a lot of air pollution from vehicular movement. We know that 9,000 people per annum, over 9,000 people per annum die from respiratory, from air pollution as a main cause. And that is a number that we felt we can definitely use our architecture to start to respond to, knowing that moss cleans the air and provides clean, fresh, good oxygen. And it was, for us, it was critical that that the building starts to reflect any type of regenerative living. We also decided to explore brick and really think about brick in a different way. And this is because of the context. We're in a conservation area. The main materiality around us is brickwork. And we started to explore Kenotech's K-brick, which was recently highlighted in Design. And the reason for this particular one is because it's made from 90% construction and demolition waste. And it's also not a fired brick, it's compressed rather than fired. So it uses a tenth of the embodied carbon. And interestingly, the color of the brick, while we don't choose to use pink or blue or yellow in this particular case, the colors have again come from recycled ink cartridges as well. And so it's something we're exploring to ensure that the architecture is reflective of the people who we are serving. Thank you very much. I shall now stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Tara. That was really engaging. Yes, technical, but at the same time, I think it's completely packed full of, so many inspiring pointers for industry players, whoever they are. There's something they can take away. And I love the way you convey, the argumentation is just very crystal clear. The barriers to adoption, the four main ones, behavior change, industry-wide upskilling, performance monitoring, consistency of definitions and case studies and so on. I mean, these are all, what comes out of your work is such a lot of very practical actions that people can take if they themselves have already, they've got their tactics, but I think we're now in an age where we need to learn very closely from one another and help each other. Because I was going to ask you, what are the most important ways going from here? We've now, as you said, we've got the new RIBA document just published. But if we're now talking about regenerative design within planetary boundaries, which is Kate, the famous
Rayworth.
Economist, Kate Rayworth's donut economics mantra and philosophy. Between now and 2030, what are the most important ways in which the industry, do you think, can meet the net zero whole life carbon for new and retrofitted buildings? If they adopt all the things that you yourself practice and all the things that are in your policy documents, will that be enough? I suspect that beyond that, there's an awful lot of industry practices that need to be themselves retrofitted, management practices, and all aspects of delivery and construction and so on. Moreover, it's an incredibly holistic challenge.
No, it absolutely is. And I think the key point is that we all need to be doing everything we can right now. There's no longer time to waste. There's no longer time to debate. I think the IPCC report was really quite clear in the fact that all decisions we make really affect how we live today. We're already experiencing our incredibly hot summers or our rapid change in weather. We're already experiencing that now. So I think it's all hands on deck, really, and we need to be able to work far more collaboratively. I think it's important to be aware that we're all in this together. We're all on the collective journey, if you like. And I think that's the really exciting opportunity. We have groups like LETI, the London I was trying to remember the acronym of LETI now. Energy, that's it. The
London Energy
Transformative Initiative. That's it. Who've just released their retrofit guide, and who I think last year or the year before released their design guide as well, which or climate emergency guidance as well, which I think many parts of the industry have sort of taken up wholly. So I think we have good guidance out there. We know what to do. We know it's achievable now. So there's not really any conversation to be had besides cracking on with it and learning from each other.
Well, one of the great heartening things about the formation of architects, sorry, what was the name of the practice? The Architects Declare, that's it.
Yes, Architects Declare, yeah, sorry.
With architecture doing place, but that's David's practice. So yeah. Architects Declare is very much the fact that in their heads, they have a wealth of guidance. The documents that you all produce as built environment experts, absolutely fantastic state-of-the-art guidance, but we need practitioners to be advocates as well. We need people like you to be out there continually making the case in this way. So I think that's really wonderful. And you will be talking next month at RIBA's Guerrilla Tactics Conference, which is taking the theme of collaboration of various forms. So collaboration with the public sector, collaboration across practices. And when you co-founded I wanted to dig into the motivations between the Paradigm Network that you co-founded with your partner Lanre and 3 other architects. Now that was in direct response to the real lack of ethnic diversity in architecture in the built environment. And I think you said at the time 40% of Londoners are from a BAME background, but only 1.2% of the built environment is reflective of that number. So the professional network that you've created is not only extolling the virtues of more deeper collaboration between practices, which is always very valuable at whatever age, or whatever background you're from, but how are you going about your championing Black and Asian representation within the built environment, but you're also working in a collaborative way, which is more community focused as well. So there's a number of things that you're trying to do in your as you move forward and with this initiative. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think certainly with the Paradigm Network, there was a clear need, and it's been going for, I think, almost 4 years now. And the co-founders and myself, like you highlighted, there was this clear lack of representation within the industry, which can be quite isolating. And so when the network started, it really started with a group of people who asked if anybody was available to turn up one evening to chat through architecture. And before we knew it, this grew and grew and grew, and we found so many people that we didn't know existed within the industry, and who in their little pockets were to a degree isolated from connecting with each other. So I think one thing that's really quite powerful about the network is that it brings an opportunity for so many different people from different backgrounds to be able to connect with each other. It's acted as such a support system for so many, and we certainly serve quite a broad group, a broad range of members, from students who are either part 1, part 2 of architecture, through to planners. We have some of our clients on there. So we've got developers in the group. We've got local authority commissioning bodies in the group. We've got architectural practices who've been underrepresented for years, decades in the group. And it acts as such a support system, both formally and informally. And it's always great to have, when great things happen in your practice, to have just a real great championing force behind you. And that's what I think the Paradigm Network serves as.
Well, what's so fantastic is you've taken it, you've got this really talented group of younger practices, but you've built the network woven in clients and all these other interest groups and bodies and so on. So it really could be called the powerhouse paradigm network.
Yeah, exactly. One day we'll change that name. But
Definitely.
yes, it's great to see clients who've been passionate, of course, about the cause, and who've lended their voices and actions critically behind the network and what it stands for. So yeah.
Great, fantastic. So I want to ask you about community. You have a very strong sense of community, and you have said that you are inspired by all the various global activists that are out there creating waves just as they need to. And from your presentation and the case studies, it's very clear that you base a lot of your work on, the authoritative nature of the way in which you work is based on continually learning and testing theories, embedding design with sustainability principles from the very start, but also working very closely with community members and so-called end users, because you have said that you regard them as the experts of where they live, work and play, and architects are but the custodians who make decisions with generational effects on place. So what the positioning really, it does honor both community lived experience and self-determination of communities. So how has your particular upbringing influenced this ethos of yours and Lonray's as architects?
I think that's such an interesting question, because I think it took many years to perhaps appreciate and eventually articulate that. But certainly growing up in Nigeria has been fascinating, growing up my younger years, my teenage years, because there's such a strong sense of community is the only word I can use for it. You turn up to someone's house and you don't really need to ring round, and everyone's in everyone's business all the time. And it was great. I think I'm so used to having being part of large families and large extended families, where everybody just not necessarily gets on, but everybody's part of each other's lives. And I think it's such a healthy way of living. And certainly in more rural parts of certainly Nigeria, the compound house is a very distinct type of architectural and socioeconomic response, in that there are lots of little homes, if you like, which are surrounded, or which surround a compound, a shared community space, if you like. And the only way into your own home is through this compound, is through the shared community space. So you have to incidentally bump into an uncle or whoever in order to go into your own home. And I think what's interesting about different types of communities who suddenly work in this way of living is that as families grow and change, as perhaps someone passes away, a family member might downsize and still stay in the same community, but just go to a smaller unit. Whereas as families grow, they're able to just interchange the homes that they in effect live in. So they sort of grow within this community. And I found that's such a huge inspiration of what makes community tick, to create opportunities for incidental meeting, to create opportunities for people to have health and well-being as the backdrop to their lives. It's not active, perhaps it's not something you necessarily need to go out and do, because the architecture and the placemaking accommodates it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. We clearly in the UK, we do not live in that holistic way. And, all the fantastic, fewer people go to churches these days, and our secular assets, our social infrastructure has reduced, which is why it's so fantastic. The GLA made that report of exemplars within social infrastructure, because I think they, as buildings are repurposed and retrofitted for these very purposes of social infrastructure for the third sector, they themselves need to fully represent the values, the regenerative design values that you're talking about, don't they?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think one important part is the role that high streets play, certainly now, but certainly as they'll continue to be playing post-COVID, how we've all changed the way we live. Many of us live very much more integrated hybrid lives now, but the role, for example, of where a lot of the social infrastructure comes to interject with each other is the high street. And thinking about the future of the high street, what does that mean for the future? Would we shop differently? Will we now go into the high street for co-working spaces rather than all trenching into the city, for example? Do we become far more hyper local than we ever have before? And I think it's such an interesting space to be able to see how social infrastructure is repurposed sustainably, of course, how social infrastructure is repurposed to accommodate our new ways of living and working.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I think the word absolutely is hyperlocal. And I mean, you're based in Waterloo, and you're on the edge of a community street, Lower Marsh, which has clearly benefited.
Epic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's benefited from this attention to the local neighborhood assets and so on. So Gbolade Design Studio, about your own studio, it's young, it's very vibrant, it's relatively small still, and it's definitely incredibly agile. And you've covered such a lot of ground in the first 1, 2, 3 years. It's amazing. So how have you managed to successfully evolve the practice over this time? What are some of the real kind of points of departure that you've really felt that you've broken through obstacles to get to the next step? What lessons would you give to offer to advice would you give to 1 or 2, two younger practices who are trying to find their way? They've been in business for 3 years and it's still not really happening.
I think it's good. I mean, to be fair, yes, we've been in business for 3 years, but for 4 years now, but we've because we've come from experience, like quite a few years working in larger practices where we've been in leadership roles, we've been able to see to a degree how business works, and we've been part of growings of larger businesses. But critically for us as a small practice, and our ethos is very much about being agile, about pivoting, and about exploring different opportunities. I think from the outset, we were very keen that we didn't limit ourselves or box ourselves in to a particular type of architecture, but we were very much focused on our principles. So creating our ethos, creating our framework on which all projects would work within and around was critical, because it really didn't matter what type of architecture we focused on, as long as it was sustainable, as long as it was people-centered, as long as it was driving innovation, and as long as it was design-led. So I think for us, it's about ensuring that we're not saying no to the opportunities that we think we have we can have great impact for, but also being bold enough and strong enough to say no when we don't feel like a particular project or particular types of clients work with where we see the practice going. But we've tried to pivot as much as possible, and COVID has been, a challenge that we've all businesses, all people have had to go through. But it's certainly provided opportunities as well, and we've definitely explored them. So I would, if given advice was the question, I would say stay optimistic, keep on keeping on. Businesses certainly, as we all know, go through ups and downs, but we truly believe, hand in heart, we truly believe that what we do here is about making everyday places for people extraordinary, and that really is our driving force. So nothing tops that, really.
Fantastic. And I myself personally, I think the fact that you are learning such a lot from your design work, but you're getting involved in actually designing policy and making sure the two are aligned so that they're cross-fertilizing each other, and you can really build a strong foundation from the alignment between the two of them. It's really brilliant.
Thank you. No, we enjoy working on very different scales.
Yeah. So what are your goals? Last question, because we're nearly out of time. So what are your goals for the coming year then? This incredible period of strange and wonderful transition that we're moving towards something new, but we need to carry on being activists and looking after our health. And I've never felt like this in the whole of my life. I don't know about you, but it's a really pivotal moment, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Absolutely is a pivotal moment. And I think that's such a big question because we haven't yet gone through all the steps we need to in order to say exactly what our goal is for the next year. But
one or two.
Exactly. Exactly. I think, this last year has been pivotal in helping us reflect a little bit more as a practice, even as a young practice, but personally, individually within the practice, but as a company. And I think next year we want to drive the idea and the experience of being more authentic to who we are as architects, who we are as activists, who we are as placemakers. We truly believe that the more authentic we are and the authenticity we bring into our work allows the people, the communities who get to live and experience the spaces that we create, be authentic themselves and have the opportunity to thrive in everyday life. So that is what I'd maybe highlight as the overall goal.
Well, that's fantastic. I would really like to think that you would be successful in winning the Urban Design Group Award for Harlow.
Fingers and toes crossed.
Gilston guidance, because I think it's really a bit of a landmark, that project, and could people, we hope everyone will read it very widely, but I mean, getting the award will bring it to the attention of an even wider audience too. So Tara, thank you so much. It's been really insightful, fantastic case studies. The one that is based in Southwark, you mentioned the Hatcham area. Is that the Hatcham in New Cross Gate?
Hatcham in so not New Cross, just above Old Kent Road.
Oh, Old Kent Road.
Yes, exactly. Just above on Ilderton Road, Hatcham and Ilderton.
Exactly. I think there's only one Hatcham, and that's where I went.
That's it.
That's where I went to school.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, if it's New Cross Gate, it's not very far from the Old Kent Road.
No, it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not very far at all.
Anyway.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, brilliant.
Anyway, they're all absolutely wonderful. I love the way you pull the elements apart to analyze them and present and give us the rationale to. It's hugely beneficial for anyone watching. So I would like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us tonight, and let you know that the next event up is one of Tara's colleagues, actually, who is also a fellow member of the steering group for Architects Declare. That's Julia Barfield, the famous founder of Marks Barfield. 18th of November. They were shortlisted for this year's Sterling Prize for the magnificent Cambridge Mosque. Very sadly not successful, but there's a huge amount to talk about. And Julia is ideally placed, like Tara, to reflect on how built environment professionals and their clients are fighting climate change, and what more needs to be done, and what lessons the practice is learning at the moment. So the full details are going to be on the Trust's website very, very shortly. So be sure to check them out and sign up if you can. 18th of November, back to our normal time of 6:25. Anyway, so thank you very much, Tara. It's been a pleasure to host you, and I look forward to catching up with everybody and you very soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye.